Take her out of that seat. It belongs to someone who actually matters. The command cracked across the VIP section so sharply that conversations stopped mid-sentence and dozens of heads turned toward a woman who had done nothing except remain quietly seated. Rebecca Sloan stood over her with a tight smile that never reached her eyes, one hand already reaching for the black VIP credential hanging around the woman's neck as if the decision had been made long before any facts would ever be checked. Grant Holloway, director of VIP operations for Sterling Crown Arena, folded his arms and nodded once toward the nearby security staff. "Mr. Whitmore shouldn't have to wait," he said loudly enough for surrounding guests to hear. "Escort her out if she refuses to cooperate." The woman slowly lifted her eyes. She didn't argue. She didn't stand. She simply looked at Rebecca with a calm expression that somehow made the room feel quieter instead of louder. "Are you absolutely certain?" she asked. Rebecca laughed under her breath. "I'm positive." With one quick motion, she unclipped the credential and tossed it onto the nearby welcome counter. "Anyone can print one of these." The laminated badge slid across polished marble before stopping against a silver centerpiece, and several nearby guests exchanged uneasy glances. Standing a few feet away, Charles Whitmore adjusted the cuff of his tailored navy jacket, watching the exchange with visible impatience. "Can we move this along?" he asked. "The concert starts in a few minutes." Grant immediately motioned toward the empty premium chair beside the stage. "Of course, sir. That seat is reserved for distinguished guests." The seated woman glanced from Charles to Grant before quietly saying, "Interesting choice of words." Grant's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, this isn't a debate. You're in the wrong seat." "According to whom?" she replied. "According to the people responsible for this event," he answered without hesitation. She looked at him for another second before speaking in the same measured tone. "Then you've just thrown away the signature that authorized this entire evening." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "I've heard every story imaginable." One security officer stepped closer, clearly uncomfortable but waiting for Grant's instruction. Around them, phones slowly began to rise, though no one said a word. The tension spread through the VIP lounge like a sudden change in temperature. Somewhere behind the front rows, a young hospitality trainee named Emily Carter stared at the arena tablet in her hands, her face draining of color as she reread the access record that had appeared only minutes earlier. She looked from the screen to the woman in the chair, then back to Grant, unsure whether speaking would cost her career. Grant never noticed. He was too busy smiling at Charles Whitmore while gesturing toward the now disputed seat. The woman finally rose without a trace of panic, brushed an invisible wrinkle from her dark jacket, and calmly picked up the credential Rebecca had thrown aside. She held it for only a moment before looking directly at Grant. "You didn't remove me because of a seat," she said quietly. "You removed me because you decided what kind of person deserved to sit in it." For the first time, even Charles stopped smiling. 21 minutes earlier, none of them had known her name. In less than 21 minutes, every person standing in that VIP section would wish they had. 21 minutes earlier, the entrance to Sterling Crown Arena looked exactly the way the marketing brochures promised it would. Crystal lighting reflected across polished marble floors. Soft jazz floated through the lobby. Staff members welcomed guests with practiced smiles while cameras prepared to broadcast the One City, One Future gala across the country. Danielle Brooks stepped through the main public entrance alone, wearing a simple charcoal jacket, dark slacks, comfortable flats, and a small leather shoulder bag. There was no entourage surrounding her, no security detail clearing a path, and no designer labels announcing wealth before she spoke a single word. That had been intentional. She had spent years reminding executives that customer service should never depend on appearances. Tonight she intended to find out whether anyone had actually listened. Her executive assistant, Nicole Hayes, had protested that morning. She insisted someone should accompany Danielle through the arena. Danielle declined. If employees recognized their chief executive before they recognized basic human dignity, then the inspection would prove nothing. She wanted every greeting, every glance, every decision to be honest. At the VIP entrance, Emily Carter greeted her with a nervous but genuine smile. Emily accepted the digital credential, scanned it once, then immediately looked back at the display with surprise. A green banner stretched across the screen reading Executive Owner Access Authorized. Emily smiled again. "Welcome, Ms. Brooks. Your seat is A1. Everything is ready for you." Danielle thanked her quietly and walked toward the front row without drawing attention to herself. Emily continued staring at the tablet for another moment before Rebecca Sloan approached from behind. "What are you looking at?" Rebecca asked. Emily turned the screen slightly. "This guest has owner-level access." Rebecca barely glanced at the display before looking across the room toward Danielle. Her expression hardened almost immediately. "The system probably assigned the wrong profile," she muttered. "It happens." Emily hesitated, but it matched her identification. Rebecca dismissed the comment with a wave of her hand. "Do not worry about it. I will handle it." Danielle settled comfortably into seat, A1 overlooking the stage where musicians rehearsed beneath warm white lights. Volunteers arranged scholarship presentation materials while technicians counted down to the nationwide livestream. She watched employees moving between guests, greeting some with enthusiasm while barely acknowledging others. Most people never noticed her. That was exactly what she wanted. Several minutes later, Grant Holloway entered the VIP lounge carrying a schedule in one hand and speaking confidently into a wireless headset. Behind him walked Charles Whitmore, one of the evening's largest financial contributors, accompanied by two business associates. Grant smiled broadly until Charles stopped walking and frowned toward the front row. "Why is someone already sitting in A1?" Charles asked. Grant followed his gaze. His smile disappeared. He studied Danielle from across the room for several long seconds before asking the nearest employee, "Who checked her into that seat?" Emily slowly raised her hand. Grant looked from Emily to Danielle, then quietly said something to Rebecca that no guest could hear. Rebecca's eyes narrowed, and together they started walking directly toward the front row. Grant Holloway slowed his pace just enough to study Danielle from a distance before speaking again. "Who assigned seat A1?" he asked without taking his eyes off her. Emily swallowed and answered honestly. "I did." The system confirmed her access and displayed owner-level authorization. Grant extended his hand for the tablet. Emily hesitated for only a second before giving it to him. He scanned the screen, frowned, then quietly handed it to Rebecca Sloan. "Take another look," he said. Rebecca stared at the display for several seconds before pressing a few buttons. "This cannot be right," she muttered. "Someone must have entered the wrong profile." Emily carefully replied. The identification matched the reservation exactly. Rebecca looked at Danielle instead of the screen. "Systems make mistakes. People make mistakes too." Danielle remained seated, reading the event program resting in her lap, as if the conversation had nothing to do with her. Around them, guests continued arriving through the private entrance, while servers carried trays of sparkling water and appetizers between small groups of donors and sponsors. Charles Whitmore adjusted his jacket and stepped beside Grant. "Is there a problem?" he asked. Grant lowered his voice. "Nothing we cannot solve." Charles glanced toward Danielle, then toward the stage. "That seat has always been reserved for distinguished guests." Grant nodded immediately. "It will be available shortly." Rebecca approached Danielle with a professional smile that felt carefully rehearsed. "Good evening, ma'am. May I verify your ticket one more time?" Danielle handed over her digital pass without protest. Rebecca examined it for less than 2 seconds before requesting a government-issued identification card. Danielle quietly provided it. Rebecca compared the two documents, then looked back at Danielle with visible doubt. "Would you mind waiting while we perform additional verification?" Danielle folded her hands calmly. "Has every guest in this section been asked for additional identification?" Rebecca paused. "Standard procedure." Danielle glanced toward Charles, who had entered the VIP area only moments earlier without showing anyone another document after his initial check-in. "Interesting," she said softly. "The procedure appears remarkably selective." Grant stepped forward before Rebecca could answer. "Sir," he said to Charles, "please give us another minute." Then he turned back to Danielle. "We simply need to confirm your credentials." Danielle met his eyes without raising her voice. "The system already confirmed them." Grant replied, "Technology is useful, but judgment matters too." Those words lingered in the air longer than he expected. Emily looked down at the tablet again and noticed something that immediately unsettled her. The owner authorization banner had disappeared. In its place was a yellow notice reading "Duplicate entry under review." She knew with absolute certainty that message had not been there 1 minute earlier. Her heartbeat quickened as she quietly opened the activity history hidden inside the application. A fresh update appeared at the top of the log. User modification recorded. Access status manually changed. Emily looked toward Grant, who had already slipped his company tablet back into his jacket. Across the room, Marcus Reed, an independent journalist covering the charity gala, had been watching the exchange from his seat near the aisle. He noticed that only one guest was being questioned while every other VIP continued toward the front without interruption. He slowly stood, closed the notebook in his hands, and took a careful step toward the growing circle around Danielle, just as Emily realized someone inside the arena had changed the official record in real time. Emily felt her hands tighten around the tablet as she read the activity log for a second time. There was no misunderstanding. The owner authorization had not expired. It had not failed. Someone with administrative privileges had replaced it with a duplicate entry warning less than 30 seconds earlier. She looked up at Grant, then at Rebecca, trying to convince herself there had to be another explanation. "Mr. Holloway," she said carefully, "the system did not change on its own." Grant turned slowly. "Excuse me." Emily swallowed. The record was modified manually. For a brief moment, the sounds of the orchestra warming up seemed louder than every conversation in the room. Rebecca stepped between them before Grant answered. "Emily, you are new here. You are looking at information you do not fully understand." Emily did not lower the tablet. "I know what I scanned. I also know what I am looking at now." Rebecca's polite smile disappeared. "Then stop looking." Danielle remained perfectly still, watching the exchange without interrupting. Her calm somehow made everyone else's nervousness more obvious. Marcus Reed walked a few steps closer, notebook still in one hand. "Is there a reason only one guest is being questioned?" he asked. Grant answered without looking at him. "This is an internal matter." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting, because from where I am standing, it looks like a public one." Several nearby guests shifted their attention away from the stage and toward the growing conversation. Charles Whitmore glanced at his watch before speaking with visible impatience. "Can someone simply seat me? We are wasting valuable time." Grant immediately pointed toward seat A1. "That chair will be available in just a moment, sir." Danielle finally looked at Charles. "Did anyone tell you that another guest already has a confirmed reservation for it?" Charles hesitated for the first time. "I assumed there had been an error." Danielle answered quietly. "Sometimes the error is not in the computer." Emily took one careful step forward. "The reservation was never wrong," she said. "I saw owner-level authorization before it was changed." Rebecca turned sharply toward her. "That is enough." "No," Emily replied, surprising even herself. "It is not enough. I scanned her credential myself." Grant's expression hardened. "Emily, if you want to continue working here, you need to understand the difference between following instructions and questioning management." The words landed heavily. Emily looked around the VIP section. Dozens of guests had stopped talking. Servers stood frozen beside silver trays. Even the musicians on stage seemed to fade into the background as the silence grew heavier. Marcus closed his notebook. "One question," he said. "If her access was invalid, why did someone have to edit the record after she checked in?" Grant did not answer. Rebecca quickly stepped toward Emily and reached for the tablet. "Give me that." Emily held it just long enough to press one button. A confirmation message appeared. Activity history exported successfully. The file had already been sent to her secure employee account before Rebecca could take the device from her hands. Rebecca looked down at the screen, then back at Emily with unmistakable frustration. At that exact moment, one of the arena's large overhead monitors briefly flickered as technicians tested the nationwide live broadcast feed, and Danielle quietly reached into her bag, took out her phone, and unlocked it before placing a single call that no one else in the room yet realized would change everything. Danielle held the phone to her ear for only a moment before the call connected. "Nicole," she said in the same calm voice she had used since entering the arena. "Open the Founder channel, but do not interrupt the event. I want every system log preserved exactly as it is." On the other end, Nicole Hayes answered immediately. "Already recording. I have access to the security archive and the access control server. Has someone escalated the situation?" Danielle looked across the room at Grant, who was already speaking quietly with two security supervisors while Rebecca folded her arms with unmistakable confidence. "Yes," Danielle replied. "Do not intervene yet. Let them finish making their decision." Nicole paused only long enough to understand what those words meant. "Understood." Founder protocol remains on standby. Danielle ended the call and slipped her phone back into her bag. Grant walked toward her with renewed authority. Ma'am, this conversation has gone on long enough. Since your credential is under review, we need you to relocate to another section until verification is complete. Danielle looked at the empty chair he was pointing towards several rows behind the VIP area. That is not my seat. It is the one available to you, Grant answered. Charles Whitmore remained standing nearby, waiting for the front row as though the outcome had already been settled. Rebecca took Danielle's digital pass again and examined it with exaggerated skepticism. There is still no confirmation that you belong in this section, Danielle answered quietly. There was confirmation until someone changed the record. Rebecca ignored the statement. Please cooperate so we can avoid unnecessary disruption. Around them, more guests had begun whispering. The atmosphere no longer felt like a charity gala. It felt like a courtroom waiting for evidence. Marcus Reed watched every exchange without raising his voice. Emily stood several feet away, visibly anxious, replaying the exported activity log in her mind. She knew the truth was now safely stored outside the arena's internal system, but she also knew speaking again could cost her the career she had only recently begun. Grant nodded toward one of the security supervisors. Please assist our guest to the alternate seating area. The supervisor stepped forward respectfully. Ma'am, if you would come with us, we will make sure you are comfortable while this is resolved. Danielle looked at him, recognizing the hesitation in his expression. Are you acting on verified information? She asked gently. Or on an assumption? The supervisor did not answer. He simply glanced back at Grant. That silence carried more weight than any accusation. For just an instant, Danielle was no longer standing inside Sterling Crown Arena. She remembered being 17 years old beside her mother outside an old concert hall in Charlotte. They had saved for months to buy 2 legitimate tickets. Yet before anyone scanned them, an employee had looked at their clothes, looked at the line of well-dressed guests behind them, and quietly suggested they must be waiting at the wrong entrance. Her mother never argued. She simply held Danielle's hand and whispered, "Never let someone else's prejudice define your worth." That memory disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. Danielle returned to the present and looked directly at Grant. My mother once paid to enter a room that refused to see her. I promised myself I would build places where that would never happen again. Grant let out a short laugh that several nearby guests immediately found uncomfortable. You built this place? He asked with open disbelief. Danielle met his eyes without the slightest change in expression. Run my name, she said. You still have time to correct your mistake. Grant shook his head, turned toward the security staff, and gave one final instruction. Remove her from the VIP section before the live broadcast begins. At that exact moment, every screen inside the arena counted down from 10 seconds as the nationwide live stream prepared to go live. The countdown reached 8 seconds. 7, 6. Bright cameras suspended above the arena slowly rotated toward the stage while producers spoke through headsets behind the control glass. Grant Holloway glanced at the giant display and smiled with quiet satisfaction. Perfect timing, he said. Let us clear this up before the audience sees any distraction. Danielle Brooks looked at the nearest security supervisor and gave him a reassuring nod. You are doing your job, she said softly. Just make sure everyone else is doing theirs. The supervisor hesitated. He had escorted difficult guests before. He had never been asked to remove someone who remained this calm, while everyone around her grew more unsettled. Grant interpreted that hesitation as uncertainty. Do not overthink it, he said firmly. The access record has already been reviewed. Emily Carter could not stay silent any longer. No, she said, her voice shaking but clear enough for nearby guests to hear. The access record was changed after she checked in. Rebecca Sloan immediately turned toward her. Emily, enough. You have already crossed the line. Emily held her ground. I exported the activity history before the tablet was taken away. It shows exactly when the record changed. Grant's expression hardened. You had no authority to do that. Neither did whoever rewrote the reservation, Emily answered. The words settled over the VIP section like a heavy curtain. Marcus Reed stepped beside her, closing the distance without raising his voice. Then there is a simple solution, he said. Run her name through the master database instead of the edited local record. Grant folded his arms. That will not be necessary. Marcus tilted his head slightly. If the facts are on your side, why avoid them? Charles Whitmore shifted uncomfortably. For the first time that evening, he looked less impatient than uncertain. Grant, he said quietly, perhaps we should verify everything before the broadcast. Grant forced a confident smile. There is nothing left to verify. Danielle finally spoke again. Actually, there is. She removed her phone once more and looked at the screen. A single message from Nicole Hayes appeared. Founder channel active. System archives secured. Audit logs preserved. Secondary authorization standing by. Danielle typed only 4 words in reply. Wait for my signal. Nicole answered almost instantly. Understood. Meanwhile, inside the operations center overlooking the arena floor, several executives noticed unusual security flags appearing across the internal dashboard. Access history locked. Reservation edits preserved. Administrative override pending. One technician frowned. Who activated founder protocol? Another shook his head. No one below executive authority can do that. Back in the VIP section, Grant took one final step toward Danielle. This event is about honoring students, he said. Do not make yourself the story. Danielle met his gaze without the slightest hint of anger. I never intended to. She paused just long enough for every nearby guest to hear her next sentence. I offered you 3 opportunities to choose integrity over assumption. Grant answered immediately, and I chose policy. Danielle slowly nodded. No, she replied. You chose your version of it. Above them, the arena lights dimmed. The opening music filled the room. Every giant screen switched from the countdown clock to the live national broadcast feed, and before the master of ceremonies could deliver the first welcome, every display suddenly flickered as a new authorization request appeared across the production system, requesting direct access from the office of the founder. The request remained on every production monitor for less than 3 seconds before the entire broadcast system accepted it automatically. A soft confirmation tone echoed through the control room. The master of ceremonies stopped mid-step as the giant screens surrounding the arena faded to black. Guests looked upward in confusion. Grant Holloway frowned and reached for his radio. What is happening? He demanded. No one answered. Instead, a single company seal appeared across every screen inside the arena, followed by a familiar name that thousands of employees had seen only in annual reports and leadership broadcasts. Danielle Brooks, founder and chief executive officer. Sterling Crown Entertainment. The silence that followed seemed to drain the air from the room. Rebecca Sloan stared at the display, then slowly turned toward the woman she had been trying to remove only moments earlier. Charles Whitmore's face lost every trace of confidence as he looked from the screen to Danielle and back again. Even the security supervisor instinctively stepped backward. Then Nicole Hayes appeared live from corporate headquarters. Her voice was calm, clear, and impossible to mistake. Good evening. Founder protocol has been authenticated. All arena operations are now reporting directly to the office of the Chief Executive Officer. Before tonight's scholarship presentation continues, there is an urgent matter concerning the integrity of guest services that must be addressed. Every camera inside the arena automatically shifted toward the VIP section. Danielle remained exactly where she had been standing. She did not wave. She did not smile. She simply folded her hands in front of her as though the room had finally caught up with the truth she had known from the beginning. Nicole continued. Our audit confirms that executive owner access assigned to seat A1 was manually altered after the guest successfully checked in. The reservation was valid. The identity was verified. The alteration occurred only after visual assumptions replaced established procedure. Grant immediately shook his head. There has been a misunderstanding. Danielle looked at him quietly. There were several opportunities to prevent one. Rebecca finally found her voice. We did not know who you were. Danielle answered without raising her tone. That is not the problem. She paused long enough for every word to settle across the arena. The problem is how you treated the woman you believed had no power. No one spoke. No one moved. Marcus Reed slowly closed his notebook. Emily Carter lowered her eyes for a moment, fighting back tears of relief. Charles Whitmore took one step away from seat A1 as though it had suddenly become too heavy to stand beside. Danielle continued. You did not remove an intruder. You removed the person whose signature authorized this event, whose company built this arena, and whose foundation is funding every scholarship being announced tonight. Grant's face turned pale. Ms. Brooks, if you will allow me to explain. Danielle gently shook her head. Facts explain themselves. Nicole's voice returned over the arena sound system. Additional audit findings are ready for release. They include prior guest complaints, access modification records, and internal communications associated with VIP seating decisions over the past 18 months. Grant closed his eyes for a brief second. He knew exactly what those records would reveal. Around the arena, executives inside the control room stopped speaking altogether as the first confidential audit file began loading onto every screen. The confidential audit opened one page at a time across every screen in the arena. Each entry carried a timestamp, an employee identification number, and a permanent system record that no one in the room could dispute. Nicole Hayes spoke with the steady precision of someone reading verified facts instead of opinions. Over the past 18 months, 12 VIP seating records were manually altered after guests had successfully checked in. 9 of those guests later filed complaints describing unequal treatment based on appearance. 8 of those incidents involved guests of color. Every alteration originated from the same administrative account. A final line appeared beneath the report. Account owner, Grant Holloway. The room fell completely silent. Grant stared at the screen as though refusing to recognize his own name. That report does not tell the whole story, he said, his voice noticeably weaker than before. Danielle answered without anger. Then tell us the part that changes the facts. Grant searched for words that never arrived. Rebecca Sloan looked at the floor, then quietly whispered, "We were only trying to protect the image of the event." Danielle turned toward her. The image of an event is protected by integrity, not by deciding who looks worthy of respect. Charles Whitmore slowly stepped away from seat A1 and faced Danielle directly. Ms. Brooks, he said, I owe you an apology. I accepted the seat without asking why another guest had been removed. Danielle acknowledged him with a slight nod. You accepted a benefit that belonged to someone else. Next time, ask the question before accepting the privilege. Charles lowered his head. I will. Emily Carter remained motionless until Nicole spoke again. The audit also confirms that Emily Carter accurately processed the original reservation and preserved evidence before it could be deleted. Her actions protected the integrity of this investigation. Every eye in the arena turned toward the young employee. Emily looked overwhelmed, but Danielle offered her a reassuring smile. Doing the right thing is rarely comfortable, Danielle said. Thank you for choosing courage instead of convenience. The security supervisor who had been instructed to escort Danielle away quietly removed his earpiece and addressed her with genuine respect. I should have asked more questions before accepting the order. I am sorry. Danielle answered immediately. The willingness to question an unfair instruction is what protects every honest professional. Nicole's voice returned through the sound system. Based on the completed audit and under the authority of the Office of the Chief Executive Officer, Grant Holloway is removed from all managerial responsibilities effective immediately. Rebecca Sloan is also removed from duty pending final administrative processing for violations of company ethics and guest service standards. Their system credentials have now been deactivated. Almost instantly, both employee badges emitted a soft electronic tone. Grant instinctively attempted to access his management tablet, but the screen displayed only one message. Access denied. Rebecca looked down at her own credential as the indicator light changed from green to red. Around them, no one applauded. The silence carried more weight than celebration ever could. Danielle looked across the arena, then toward the stage where hundreds of scholarship recipients were waiting for the evening to begin. Tonight was never supposed to be about me, she said. It was supposed to be about opportunity. Nicole interrupted gently. Ms. Brooks, there is one final audit finding you have not seen yet. It concerns an internal list that should never have existed. Every screen changed once more as a confidential document labeled Presentation Risk began to appear before the entire arena. The confidential document expanded across every screen beneath the title Presentation Risk. No dramatic music played. No one rushed to explain it away. The list spoke for itself. It contained names, dates, seating changes, and internal notes describing certain guests as not matching the preferred image of the VIP experience. Danielle Brooks read each line in complete silence while hundreds of people around the arena watched the same evidence unfold together. Nicole Hayes broke the silence. This document was never approved by executive leadership. It violates every company policy regarding equal treatment, guest dignity, and ethical service. Effective immediately, the program is permanently abolished. Danielle slowly looked across the audience. Some guests lowered their heads. Others looked toward employees they had trusted only minutes earlier. Emily Carter stood quietly beside the aisle, still processing everything that had happened. Danielle walked toward her instead of returning to seat A1. "Emily," she said, "you protected the truth when it would have been easier to protect yourself. That is the kind of leadership this company deserves." Emily struggled to answer. "I was afraid." Danielle smiled gently. "Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing honesty while fear is still standing beside you." Nicole spoke again through the arena sound system. "Effective today, Emily Carter is promoted to Guest Experience Supervisor and will assist with the implementation of our new integrity standards." The announcement was followed by genuine applause that spread naturally through the arena. It was not applause for someone's downfall. It was applause for someone who chose principle over convenience. Danielle then turned toward the security supervisor who had nearly escorted her away. "Thank you for stopping when you realized something did not feel right," she said. "Never underestimate the value of one more question before acting." He nodded with quiet gratitude. Charles Whitmore stepped forward one final time. "Ms. Brooks, I hope one mistake does not define everyone who attended tonight." Danielle answered thoughtfully. "One mistake does not define a person. Refusing to learn from it does." She then walked past seat A1 without sitting down. Instead, she approached an elderly black woman seated several rows behind the VIP section, someone who had quietly witnessed every moment from the beginning. Danielle smiled and said, "Would you honor me by enjoying this seat tonight?" The woman looked stunned before accepting with grateful eyes. The audience rose to their feet as she was escorted to the front row, not because of status, but because of respect freely given. Danielle stepped onto the stage as the scholarship recipients gathered behind her. The nationwide broadcast resumed exactly as planned, but the evening now carried a deeper meaning than anyone had expected. She looked into the cameras and spoke with calm conviction. Tonight was never about recognizing a chief executive officer. It was about recognizing the humanity of a stranger before you know anything else about them. If respect depends on a title, a bank account, or a job description, then it was never respect at all. Every guest who enters our doors deserves dignity. Before they ever present a credential, the arena remained completely still as her words settled into every corner of the room. Then she offered one final sentence that would be repeated long after the lights went down. "I did not raise my voice tonight. I raised the standard. And from this moment forward, that standard belongs to everyone." As the scholarship ceremony finally began, the empty chair Danielle left behind in the front row quietly became the strongest symbol in the building. Power had never belonged to the best seat. It had always belonged to the person willing to make sure everyone else was treated as though they belonged there too.